9. Particular types of business meetings. Regular meeting. The term regular meeting or stated meeting refers to the periodic business meeting of a permanent society, local branch, or board held at weekly, monthly, quarterly, or similar intervals for which the day, as the first Tuesday of each month, should be prescribed by the bylaws and the hour and place should be fixed by a standing rule. If, instead, an organization follows the practice of scheduling the day, hour, or place of its regular meeting by resolution, notice, also referred to as the call of the meeting, must be sent to all members a reasonable time in advance of each regular meeting. In any organization, notice must be sent at a reasonable time in advance of each regular meeting that is separated by more than a quarterly time interval, see 9.7 below, from the previous regular meeting. Notice must also be sent a reasonable time in advance of a convention of delegates. In many organizations, a call is sent to all members in advance of each meeting. In all such cases, to avoid uncertainty about what period in advance is reasonable, the specific number of days notice required, which will depend on the conditions of the particular assembly and which each organization must determine for itself, should be prescribed in the bylaws. See 5634. Unless otherwise provided in the bylaws, the number of days is computed by counting all calendar days, including holidays and weekends, excluding the day of the meeting, but including the day the notice is sent. When notice is required to be sent, unless a different standard is specified, that requirement is met if written notice is sent to each member, either A, by postal mail to the member's last known address, or B, by a form of electronic communication such as email or fax by which the member has agreed to receive notice. Each regular meeting normally completes a separate session, as explained in 8.4, see adjourned meeting 9.17 through 19 below. However, some societies have frequent meetings for social or cultural purposes at which business may be transacted, and also hold a session every month or quarter, especially for business. In such societies, the term regular meeting applies particularly to the regular business session. Important rules relating to the continuance of a question from one session to the next depend on whether no more than a quarterly time interval intervenes between the two sessions. In this book, it is understood that no more than a quarterly time interval intervenes between two sessions if the second session begins at any time during or before the third calendar month after the calendar month in which the first session ends. For example, with reference to a session held in January, no more than a quarterly time interval has elapsed since the previous session if that session ended on or after October 1st, the preceding calendar year, and no more than a quarterly time interval will elapse before the next session if that session will begin on or before April 30th of the current year. If two business sessions are separated by more than a quarterly time interval, or if the term of a specified portion of the membership expires before the start of the later session, as may happen in an elected legislative assembly or in a board, then business can go over from the earlier session to the later one only by means of referral to a committee. Chapter 13. If two consecutive regular business sessions are separated by no more than a quarterly time interval, then, provided that there is no specified portion of the membership whose term expires before the start of the later session, there are several ways in which business can go over from the earlier session to the later one. Note: it should be noted that if some, but not all, of an organization's regular business sessions are separated by no more than quarterly time intervals, it is only between meetings which are that close together that a question can go over from one session to the next by any means other than a referral to the committee. If a society holds regular monthly business meetings from September through May, for example, but does not meet during the summer, a question may be postponed until the next meeting if any of the meetings from September through April, but such a question cannot be postponed at the May meeting until the September meeting. Back to reading. 1. By being postponed to or otherwise set as a general special order for the later session, see 14 and 41. 2. By being laid on the table, chapter 17, at the earliest session and not taken from the table, chapter 34, before that session adjourns. 3. By going over to the later session as unfinished business or as an unfinished special order, see 21.7b and 41.18 through 23. 4. By being the subject of a motion to reconsider, chapter 37, that is not finally disposed of at the earlier session. And 5. By being referred to a committee, chapter 13, that can report at the later session. The only way for business to be carried over directly from one session to some later regular session beyond the next regular business session is by being referred to a committee that will report at that later session. When a question is carried over from one session to another by any of the above processes, it remains within the control of the assembly as a question that has been temporarily but not finally disposed of. Any business that falls within the objects of the society as defined in its bylaws, or in the case of a board, any business within the authority of the board, can be transacted at any regular meeting, provided that the parliamentary rules relating to action already taken or to matters not finally disposed of and remaining within the control of the assembly are complied with in cases where they apply. Compare 10:26 to 27. See also chapters 35 and 38. Special meeting. A special meeting or called meeting is a separate session of a society held at a time different from that of any regular meeting, and convened only to consider one or more items of business specified in the call of the meeting. Notice of the time, place, and purpose of the meeting, clearly and specifically describing the subject matter of motions or items of business to be brought up, must be sent to all members a reasonable number of days in advance. The reason for special meetings is to deal with matters that may arise between regular meetings and that require action by the society before the regular meeting, or to dedicate an entire session to one or more particular matters. Chapter 4. Or, not Chapter 4, I'm sorry, Note. When a special meeting intervenes between two regular meetings, that does not affect the rules governing whether and how business can go over from the earlier regular meeting to the later regular meeting. Back to reading. As in the case of a regular meeting, the session of a special meeting in ordinary society is normally concluded in a simple meeting, unless the assembly at the special meeting schedules an adjourned meeting. See below. Special meetings can properly be called only A, as authorized in the bylaws, see 5636, or B, when authorized by the assembly itself as part of formal disciplinary procedures for purposes of conducting a trial and determining a punishment, see 6321N9. A section of the bylaws that authorizes the calling of special meetings should prescribe 1. By whom such a meeting is to be called, which provision is usually in the form of a statement that the president, or in large organizations, the president with the approval of the board, can call a special meeting, and that he shall call a special meeting at the written report of a specific number of members, and 2, the number of days notice required. The number of days is computed in the same manner as for regular meetings, see 9.4. The president directs the secretary to send the notice of the special meeting to all members of the society's expense in compliance with the bylaws no later than the required number of days in advance, making sure that it contains all the necessary information. The only business that can be transacted at a special meeting is that which has been specified in the call of the meeting. This rule, however, does not preclude the consideration of privileged motions, or if any subsidiary, incidental, or other motions that may arise in connection with the transition of such business or the conduct of the meeting. If at a special meeting action is taken relating to business not mentioned in the call, that action, to become valid, must be ratified, see 1054-57, by the organization at a regular meeting or at another special meeting properly called for that purpose. The requirement that business transacted at a special meeting be specified in the call should not be confused with the requirement that a previous notice of a motion be given. Although the call of a special meeting must state the purpose of that meeting, it need not give the exact content of individual motions that will be considered. When a main motion relating to business specified in the call of a special meeting is pending, it is as fully open to germane amendment as if it had been moved at a regular meeting. Adjourned meeting. An adjourned meeting is a meeting in continuation of the session of the immediately preceding regular or special meeting. The name adjourned meeting means that the meeting is scheduled for a particular time and place, if it is not otherwise established, by the assemblies adjourning to or adjourning until that time and place. If a regular meeting or special meeting is unable to complete its work, an adjourned meeting can be scheduled for later the same day or some other convenient time before the next regular meeting by the adoption, as applicable, of a main or privilege motion to fix the time to which to adjourn, or a main motion to adjourn until a specified time. See chapters 21 and 22. In such a case, the adjourned meeting is sometimes spoken of as an adjournment of the regular or special meeting. This usage should not be confused with this act of adjourning. When common expressions such as regular or stated meeting, special or called meeting, and annual meetings, see below, are used in the bylaws, rules, or resolutions adopted by an organization, the word meeting is understood to mean session in the parliamentary sense and therefore covers all adjourned meetings. An adjourned meeting takes up its work at the point where it was interrupted in the order of business or in the consideration of the question that was postponed to the adjourned meeting, except that the minutes of the preceding meeting are first read. Annual meeting. The term annual meeting is used in two senses. Certain types of societies may hold only one business meeting of the general membership each year, perhaps leaving the management of the organization's affairs in the meantime to a board. Such a meeting is then the annual meeting of the society. Just the next paragraph. I am so sorry. I'm recording this very late at night. In local organizations that hold regular business meetings throughout the year, however, the bylaws may provide that one of these regular meetings, held at a specified time each year, shall be known as the annual meeting. The only difference between this kind of annual meeting and the other regular meeting is that the annual reports of officers and standing committees, the election of officers, and any other items of business that the bylaws may prescribe for the annual meeting are in order, besides the ordinary business that may come up. The minutes of the previous regular meeting are read and approved as usual at the annual meeting, and the minutes of the annual meeting are read and approved at the next regular meeting. Minutes of one annual meeting should not be held for action until the next one a year later. Business that is required to be attended to at the annual meeting can be taken up at any time when it is in order during the session of the annual meeting, or, in other words, either at that meeting as originally convened at, or at any adjournment of it. If such an item of business has actually been taken up as required during the session of the annual meeting, it may also go over to a later session by any of the means by which a matter may be temporarily but not finally disposed of, 9, 8 through 11. This is usually unwise, however, unless completing the item of business during the session proves impossible or impractical. See also 14:12. If the assembly fails to take up any such item of business as required before final adjournment of the annual meetings, and the next regular meeting is held with no quarterly time interval, the business goes over to that meeting as unfinished business or as an unfinished special order. Executive consider 41:20, or compare 41:20. My apologies. Executive session. In executive session in general parliamentary usage has come to mean any meeting of a deliberative assembly or a portion of a meeting at which the proceedings are secret. This term originally referred to the consideration of executive business, that is, presidential nominations to appointive offices and treaties, being behind closed doors in the United States Senate. This practice of organizations operating under the lodge system is equivalent to holding all regular meetings in executive session. In any society, certain matters relating to discipline, Chapters 61 and 63, such as trials, may be handled only in executive session. A meeting enters into executive session only when required by rule or established custom, or upon the adoption of a motion to do so. A motion to go into or out of executive session is a question of privilege, Chapter 19, and is adopted by a majority vote. Attendance at an executive session or other closed session. Whenever a meeting is being held in executive session, only members of the body that is meeting, special invitees, and such employees or staff members of the body or tools determined to be necessary are allowed to remain in the hall. Thus, in the case of board or committee meeting being held in executive session, all persons, whether or not they are members of the organization, who are not members of the board or committee, and who are not otherwise specifically invited or entitled to attend, are excluded from the meeting. When it is desired to similarly restrict attendance at a particular meeting without imposing any obligation of secrecy, or to remove a previously imposed restriction on attendance, this may also be done by majority vote. See also 61.637. Rules relating to the secrecy of an executive session. The general rule is that anything that occurs in an executive session may not be divulged to non-members except any entitled to attend. However, action taken, as distinct from that which was said in debate, may be divulged to the extent, and only to the extent, necessary to carry it out. For example, if during executive session a member is expelled or an officer is removed from office, that fact may be disclosed to the extent described in 63.3. If the Assembly wishes to further lift the secrecy of action taken in an executive session, it may adopt a motion to do so, which is a motion to amend something previously adopted. In making or debating such a motion, the members must be careful, if the Assembly is not in executive session, to preserve the existing secrecy. A member of a society can be punished under disciplinary procedure if he violates the secrecy of an executive session. Anyone else permitted to be present is honor-bound not to divulge anything that occurred. Reading and approval of the minutes of an executive session must take place only in executive session, unless that which would be reported in the minutes is not secret. When the minutes of an executive session must be considered for approval at an executive session held solely for that purpose, the brief minutes of the latter meeting are, or are assumed to be, approved by that meeting. For additional rules regarding access to minutes and other records, including those kept by boards and committees that are protected by the secrecy of an executive session, see 4736 and 4917-19. Public session. A deliberative assembly or committee is normally entitled to determine whether non-members may attend or be excluded from its meetings, even when not in executive session. Many public and semi-public bodies, however, are governed by sunshine laws. That is, their meetings must be open to the public. Normally, such laws have no application to private non-governmental bodies. In meetings of many public bodies, such as school boards, the public may attend. Similarly, in some private organizations, such as church councils, parishioners may be entitled to attend. These attendees are not members of the meeting body and ordinarily have no right to participate. Some bodies, especially public ones, may invite non-members to express their views, but this is done under the control of the presiding officer, subject to any relevant rules adopted by the body and subject to appeal by a member. Often, by rule or practice, time limits are placed on speakers and relevance is closely monitored. Electronic meetings. Extension of parliamentary law to electronic meetings. Except as authorized in the bylaws, the business of an organization or board can be validly transacted only at a regular or properly called meeting. That is, as defined in 821, a single official meeting or gathering in one room or area of the assembly of its members at which a quorum is present. Among some organizations, there is an increasing preference, especially in the case of relatively small board or other assembly, to transact business at electronic meetings. That is, at meetings in which, rather than all participating members being physically present in one room or area, as in traditional or face-to-face meetings, some or all of them communicate with the others through electronic means, such as the internet or by telephone. A group that holds such alternative meetings does not lose its character as a deliberative assembly, see 1.1, so long as the meetings provide, at a minimum, conditions of opportunity for simultaneous oral communication among all participating members equivalent to those of meetings held in one room or area. Under such conditions, an electronic meeting that is properly authorized in the bylaws is treated as though it were a meeting at which all the members who are participating are actually present. If electronic meetings are to be authorized, it is advisable to adopt additional rules pertaining to their conduct. See additional rules for the conduct of electronic meetings below. Types of electronic meetings. Various provisions for electronic meetings are possible, so that more than the minimum standard of an audio conference may be required. Thus, if the bylaws provide for meeting by video conference, but not merely by teleconference or audio conference, the meeting must be conducted by a technology that allows all participating members to see each other, as well as to hear each other at the same time. Provision may also be made for the use of additional collaborative technology to aid in the in the conduct of a meeting. It is important to understand that, regardless of the technology used, the opportunity for simultaneous oral communication is essential to the deliberative character of the meeting. Therefore, a group that attempts to conduct the deliberative process in writing, such as by postal mail, email, chat rooms, or fax, which is not recommended, does not constitute a deliberative assembly. Any such effort may achieve a consultative character, but it is foreign to the deliberative process as understood under parliamentary law. Electronic meetings and committees. As in the case of board or any assembly, committees that are expressly established for the by the bylaws can hold a valid electronic meeting only if authorized in the bylaws to do so. A committee that is not expressly established by the bylaws, however, may instead be authorized to hold electronic meetings by a standing rule of the parent body or organization, by the motion establishing the particular committee, or by instructions included in a motion referring as an individual matter to the committee or issued subsequent to such a motion. See 13.8d and 13.22. Additional rules for the conduct of electronic meetings. If an organization authorizes its assembly, boards, or committees to hold electronic meetings, such a provision should indicate whether members who are not present in person have the right to participate by electronic means, or whether the body may choose to allow or to disallow such participation, and, conversely, whether there is required to be a central location for members who wish to attend meetings in person. The notice of electronic meeting must include an adequate description of how to participate in it. For example, the telephone number to call for a teleconference must be provided. Various additional rules in the bylaws, special rules of order, standing rules, or instructions to a committee as appropriate may also be necessary or advisable regarding the conduct of electronic meetings, such as rules relating to the type of equipment or computer software required for participation in meetings, whether the organization must provide such equipment or software, and contingencies for technical difficulties or malfunctions, methods for determining the presence of a quorum, the conditions under which a member may raise a point of order doubting the presence of a quorum, and the conditions under which to contain presence of a quorum is presumed if no such point of order is raised, methods for seeking recognition and obtaining the floor, means by which motions may be submitted in writing during a meeting, and methods for taking and verifying votes. In addition, depending on the character of the organization, it may be advisable to adopt provisions for ensuring that non-members cannot participate in meetings unless properly invited to do so, especially during any meeting or portion of a meeting held in executive session. For examples of rules for electronic meetings designed to meet various needs, see the appendix, Sample Rules for Electronic Meetings, pages 635 through 649.